Welcome back to part 2 of this 12-part program on the book of Revelation. If you have made it this far, I want you to take a good hard look at yourself, because you are a disciple of the Lord Yeshua. You wouldn't be going through this program if you weren't. A disciple is simply someone who has a heart to grow closer to God, to grow deeper in your understanding of who is this God, who is the Son, the Messiah, whom He has sent, and what is your role, what are you being called to do. As we go through this part 2, it's very much talking to us about these disciples. Now, the disciples are righteous disciples. And I think the text shows us that they are a remnant that God has selected to work for Him at this time of the Great Tribulation. Now in part 2 we're going to go into the millennial kingdom. We'll talk a little bit about the end of time. And we'll do it with the remnant in mind. That's what we're going to do in this part 2. Now in this session, let me ask you a question. If we are not supposed to understand apocalyptic language in a literal sense, then how do we understand it? What we're going to do in this session is we're going to practice with the 7 trumpet judgments, and I'm going to focus on understanding meaning from apocalyptic language. So this is session 7. There will be 6 sessions in this part 2. And in session 7, I call it apocalyptic language and the Shofar judgments. Now, let's talk a little bit first about apocalyptic language. How do we understand God who has no form? Apocalyptic language is helping us, just mere little human beings, to understand this magnificent God. Now, I'm talking about God the Father who has no form, and He is referred to as Spirit. And He is described in a way that we mere humans can try to understand what this Spirit is. So the ruach, the Hebrew word for spirit, is also translated wind and breath, because we can't see wind. We can see the clouds moving across the sky. We can see the manifestation of the wind, but we can't see the wind itself. We can feel the dust particles against our face, but that's not wind. That's the manifestation of the wind, and the same with breath. So apocalyptic language is going to help us understand God. It's also going to help us understand future events that involve angels and supernatural forces. It's like trying to understand God and understand these supernatural events that are coming in the future. And apocalyptic language is designed to help us understand these things. And furthermore, it's going to help us understand the environment in which God dwells. So the book of Revelation is going to using this apocalyptic language. And it's drawing us in to understand these supernatural things. We're going to have to work to understand the supernatural things. Now let me give you an example of apocalyptic language. The language is describing the Messiah. And it says, His head and His hair were white like white wool like snow. And His eyes were like a flame of fire. His feet were like burnished bronze when it has been made to glow in a furnace. Now, this is not literally what He looks like. It's language that is helping us understand. Now, the Messiah, when He was here on earth, looked like the rest of us. But now, He's returning from the heavens in a role that He's going to play on the earth. And He's just no longer this person like we're used to seeing, in the pictures and everything. So it's explaining His nature with this apocalyptic language. And then it goes on to say that He's a fierce lion that rips and devours enemies. Again, He's not a lion, but it's the apocalyptic language that is helping us understand this Messiah who is returning to the earth during this period of great tribulation. And finally, it talks about a bloody lamb that has been slain. Well, he can't be a bloody lamb and a lion and have, look like all this thing with the, the feet glowing and all that stuff. That's literal, and we can't take it literally. So what it's doing is it's helping us understand this Messiah who was returning to the earth from the heavens in a role that is going to be a supernatural role. That's what the apocalyptic language is doing. Now let's keep going with Revelation, and we're going to be looking at this apocalyptic language. We read, and this is John and the vision that he's being given. I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds of the earth, so that no wind would blow on the earth or on the sea or on any tree. Now, are there really 4 angels doing that? It's apocalyptic language, and what it's going to with the anticipation is that if they let go, it's going to be this incredible this terrible thing that's going to happen to the earth, which of course is what's going to happen. So we have no wind would blow. So it's holding back all that tragic thing that's about to happen. Now, in apocalyptic language, let's take a look at 3 things. Time may be sequential, like points on a line. It may be, but often it's a Hebraic sense of time. Now, in the Hebraic sense of time, God created time. He's in all aspects of time, so time can kind of move around. It may not be sequential. We may be at one point in time, and then all of a sudden we've moved backwards in another point of time. So it may be sequential, but it may not be sequential. So we have to be careful with our sense of time. Events are not always sequential, and places are not always of this world. Okay? Now, continuing with apocalyptic language, I just want to emphasize this. Some things we simply cannot know. So don't try to make sense of everything. Now, sometimes you can't make sense of it, and maybe you're working on Revelation 5 years from now, and suddenly you get an understanding of what it is. But some things you're never going to know because we're not intended to know them. So don't worry. Don't feel that you have to understand everything you don't. And I'm pointing you to a verse in 1 Corinthians. And this is talking about wisdom, which none of the rulers of this age has understood, pointing to Satan and his minions that rule the earth now. For if they had understood it, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. So there are things that we're not going to understand. But what is important is the message. We can get the message. We may not understand all the details of this apocalyptic language. I mean, it is apocalyptic, it's supernatural, and we may not understand all the details. So don't try to force them into some time or some event or some place here on the earth. What is important is the message, and we can always get the message from the apocalyptic language. Now, let me take a look here. We're going to continue with Revelation. And referring to Israel, now this is, John is having this vision in the book of Revelation. We're in chapter 7, verse 4, and it's referring to Israel. I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 sealed from every tribe of the sons of Israel. So that's 12,000 from each tribe. And then we're going to hear something that is referring to Gentile believers. And we hear, behold, a great multitude, which no one could count, from every nation. Now that's the key to us. The nation are the are not Israel. It's not the children of Israel. It's the nations, from every nation and tribes and peoples and tongues standing before the throne. So what we've got here is we've got a picture before the throne, and it's before the throne. It's in heaven before the throne. It's apocalyptic language. It's apocalyptic imagery, and we have there's a selection out of Israel, and the message is that it's a selection. All right, don't try to make sense of 12,000, 144,000. is every tribe represented? Don't try to make sense of that, just the message. There's been a selection out of Israel. In addition to the selection out of Israel, and of course a remnant is the process of selection. In addition to the selection out of Israel, we've got this huge multitude of Gentile, I would call them Gentile believers, because the vision has them in heaven. So the Gentile believers. So there's been a selection out of Israel, but I don't see a selection out of the Gentile believers yet. I see this huge multitude from every nation and tribes and peoples. It's called a great multitude which no one could count. Now, let's go on and look at the message. We've got this scene in heaven, and we read in Revelation chapter 8, an angel came and stood at the altar holding a golden censer. And much incense was given to him. So the censer is where the incense is burning, and there's a sweet smell from the incense, so that he might add it to the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar, which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints went up before God out of the angel's hands. Now, when I was working on this, it really touched my heart of the importance of prayer, and the importance of prayer in God's selection of the remnant. And I thought to myself, I don't pray enough. I don't pray enough. Now that doesn't mean that you have to, of course you can set aside time and just pray, but you can also be talking to God is prayer. And you can talk to God when you're in the car. You can talk to God when you're walking. You can talk to God when you're at home. Maybe you're watching television and you turn the television off and say, I just would rather just have some quiet time with God. So I was really struck by this importance of prayer, and I think it's one of the things that God is going to look at when he selects the remnant from the Gentile believers in Christ. So we're going to get now a second series of wraths. Okay, the first, they opened the seven seals. Now the seventh seal initiated the next seven series of wrath. And as we move into the next seven series of wrath, all begin with the blast of the shofar. And we're going to go through these shofar judgments fairly quickly, but we're going to ask ourselves, what is the message? Okay? We have the first blast of the shofar. There came hail and fire mixed with blood, and they were thrown to the earth, and a third of the earth was burned up, and a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. I was fascinated with the concept of the third. I did a little work on that. That was my curiosity, why a third? But let's keep going here, because it's really interesting. In the first blast of the shofar, it continues, when the Lord your God cuts off the nations whose land the Lord your God gives you, and you dispossess them, and settle in their cities and in their houses, you shall set aside 3 cities for yourself in the midst of your land, which the Lord your God gives you to possess. So it continues, you shall prepare the roads for yourself and divide into 3 parts the territory of your land, which the Lord your God will give you as a possession, so that any manslayer may flee there. Now stop and think about that. We've got 3 cities where any manslayer may flee there. This is an echo of the cities of refuge that God commanded when the children of Israel first entered the land of Israel under Joshua. They were to have cities of refuge. And so innocent blood, it says in Deuteronomy, so innocent blood will not be shed in the midst of your land, which the Lord your God gives you as an inheritance, and blood guiltiness be on you. So these are people who are, in fact, innocent, but in the ancient world, there was this desire for revenge. So if you had done something and you did it for God, and it was and yet other people are coming in to try to avenge what you have done. Maybe, something happened to one of their family or something. So these are cities of refuge. And I think the message here is that God is going to give us places of refuge. Now, I think he's asking the remnant. He's going to send the remnant back on the earth to do work. I mean, that's what I see here. And yet, he's asking us to go through tribulation. We're prepared to go through tribulation. And yet there will be places of refuge for us. Let's go on to the second blast of the shofar. And we read here, a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea became blood. And a third of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. Well, we've got fire, and let's see, and we've got blood in the sea, which are echoes. Well, certainly the blood in the sea is an echo of the Exodus account, where water was turned to blood. And we've got fire, and fire both destroys and purifies. In this case, it's destroying. So God is destroying. He's in the process of destroying what is evil. I don't think of it as destroying really people. Yes, people are going to go through tribulation, but the whole purpose is to destroy what is evil. Let's go on to the third blast of the shofar. A great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of waters. The name of the star is called Wormwood, and a third of the waters became wormwood, and many men died from the waters because they were made bitter. And you can go back into the Hebrew Scriptures and see that wormwood is meaning something bitter. So we've got water turning bitter. And, of course you have to stop here, because the Exodus account, when they went through, the Red Sea parted, and they went into the wilderness, and they went 3 days without water, and they found water, and they went to drink it, and it was bitter. But God performed a miracle to turn the water from bitter to something sweet. So the people who are not with God, working with God, are going to, the water's going to be bitter. But those who are of the remnant, God is again going to protect them in a way, and to turn that water to water that you can drink. Let's look at the fourth blast of the shofar. A third of the sun and a third of the moon and a third of the stars were struck, so that a third of them would be darkened, and the day would not shine for a third of it, and the night in the same way. Well, what we're getting here is we're getting the natural world. So not only is it affecting mankind, and the water that you drink and so forth, and the fish that you eat that come from the sea, but it's affecting the natural world. And we can see that happening in our natural world today. I mean, this global warming and all that thing. Let's keep going to the fifth blast of the shofar. And the fifth angel opened the bottomless pit. Now that's, in the ancient world, was imagery of where the dead people were. And Satan dwelled there, because Satan causes death. Satan is death, and he dwells there. And smoke went up out of the pit like the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by the smoke of the pit. Then out of the smoke came locusts upon the earth, and power was given them as scorpions of the earth have power. Now, these locusts are supernatural. They are locusts. A locust is like a cricket, but they're like scorpions. They have the tail with that poisonous sting, and it continues. Let's keep going, because it continues. The locusts were told not to hurt the grass of the earth, nor any green thing, nor any tree, but only the men who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. And it continues, in those days men will seek death. In other words, they're identifying with Satan, and will not find it. They will long to die, and death flees from them. And the locust imagery continues, by the way, that locusts were in Egypt, but now we're getting these supernatural locusts that have tails that sting like a scorpion. And it continues. The appearance of the locust was like horses prepared for battle. This is apocalyptic language. And on their heads appeared to be crowns like gold, and their faces were like the faces of men. They had hair like the hair of women, and their teeth were like the teeth of lions. So these scorpions are not from God. God is allowing Satan to bring evil upon the earth. I think, let me just continue with the locusts. And then I'll stop for just a minute. The locusts had breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was like the sound of chariots of many horses rushing to battle. They have tails like scorpions and stings, and in their tails is their power to hurt men for 5 months. Okay, the locusts were in Israel, but these locusts are supernatural beings. And Satan has the power to do supernatural things because he's one of the angels of God. He has the power to do supernatural things. And the way I look at it is that God allows us to walk in the ways of the world. He allows us to, I think of it as falling and scraping my knee. And when I do, I think, oh my gosh, I'm walking in worldly ways, and I turn to God, and then He pulls me out from what I have created. So, I have a hard time thinking that God is actually bringing these things. I think God is allowing Satan to bring these things upon the earth. Now, there was, it was for 5 months. And so I thought to myself, well, what's significant about the number 5? Well, the number 3 is divine perfection. The number 4, on the 4th day of creation, God created the material world. And the numbers 5 and 6 elaborate the material world. Therefore, 4 are all the created beings and mankind in relation to God's created world. 5 is 4 plus 1. So the number 5 is viewed as the people redeemed and saved. So it's God saving them, redeeming them, and saving them so that they can walk with God in fellowship with Him. So the number 5 represents redemption. So we have these scorpions on the earth for 5 months, and yet God is saying, I am here to redeem you if you choose to be redeemed. Or if you choose to let the world continue to control you, this will happen. Let's go on to the 6th blast of the shofar. Then the 6th angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the 4 horns of the golden altar which is before God. One saying to the 6th angel who had the trumpet, release the 4 angels who are bound to the great river Euphrates. All right, and it keeps going, so let me just read a little bit farther. The number of the armies of the horsemen, so this is what the angels were releasing, was 200 million. Were there exactly 200 million? It doesn't matter. It's apocalyptic language. There were a lot of them in the armies of the horsemen. And this is how I saw in the vision, says John, talking about his vision, the horses and those who sat on them. The riders had breastplates, the color of fire, and of hyacinth and of brimstone. And I haven't got time to go into the symbolism, but you can do that. And the heads of the horses are like the heads of lions, and out of their mouths proceed fire and smoke and brimstone. And then it keeps going. 1/3 of mankind was killed by these 3 plagues, by the fire. Now we've got fire, which destroys, but it also preserves. We've got smoke, which, like incense, can be good, but it can be bad if it's coming from the fire. And smoke can kill, by the way. And the brimstone, which proceeded out of their mouths, and that makes us think of Sodom and Gomorrah. For the power of the horses is in their mouths and in their tails. This is all apocalyptic language. For their tails are like serpents and have heads, and with them they do harm. Okay, this is apocalyptic language, and I've got a workbook that goes along with this. I can help you work through some of the symbolism and the meanings and so forth. But for right now, I just want you to understand that we have gone through 6 shofar blasts. The 7th introduces the next set of 7 woes. So this is the end of the trumpet judgments. Now, the narrative shifts to 2 faithful witnesses, and I want to spend time on this. The 2 faithful witnesses I think are really important. Why 2? Well, the number 1 is unity. You can't divide it, number 1. 2 stands for there's a difference. You can separate 2 into 2 parts. You can separate 2 into good or evil. So you've got those 2 witnesses, and you can separate the two into either good or evil. Now, Satan is going to bring a false political leader and a false religious leader. So there are two there also. It could stand for those two, but I think it differentiates between good and evil. Okay, now let's go on and look about now the two witnesses. So I will grant authority to my two witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days clothed in sackcloth. All right. Many interpretations say this is Moses and Elijah. I don't want to draw that conclusion. I just want to say they're two witnesses, and for it's 3.5 years, which is the first half of the tribulation, they are given power to torment. And they're tormenting because they're distinguishing between good and evil, and if you're walking in the world in the evil direction, you're going to be tormented. Now, and then it goes on, it says, these are 2 olive trees and 2 lampstands that stand before the Lord of the earth. Now, olive trees are symbolic of Israel. And we get the lampstands we've seen, and I give you this image here, we've seen in the 7 churches are connected with those 7 churches that are all believers in Christ. They were believers in Christ who are being encouraged to walk as disciples so that they are in line to be part of the remnant. So these 2 witnesses are, and now this means it's a symbol that's become a metaphor. So if one thing is or represents another, it's a symbol, but it's done in a way that goes beyond the literal. And my goodness, I can't believe it, but I'm out of time. So I'll do the rest in the workbook, but the point I want to make is that this is apocalyptic language, it's supernatural, and we can understand, we want to get the meaning, not the literal interpretation. Shalom.
Bible Interact is a group of Bible scholars and biblical archaeologists who promote the Hebraic nature of Scripture and view the 2 Testaments as one unified message. They explain how they use a first-century approach to searching the Scriptures, and they share their methods and discoveries for discussion and dialogue. They invite your comments and participation on BibleInteract.tv, where you can also find more teachings, self-study quizzes, webinars, and interviews.